Blessings, beloveds. Welcome back. Anastasia, Cosmic Astrologer. I'm going to talk about the solar eclipse, which is coming up in a couple of days' time. And also I want to share some thoughts about the Great Conjunction. I've noticed there's been a lot of talk about it. It's obviously the hot topic for all astrologers, for sure. And many people who are working with astrology, observing, interested in it, everyone's anticipating this great conjunction. And so where I might start actually is with this great conjunction. The first thing that I would like to say, which I haven't heard many people say, is that, and I know many people are aware of this, a conjunction means a beginning, a birthing, a planting of a seed. So this anticipation that everyone has relative to the 21st of December 2020, which is when this conjunction occurs, it's not going to be a day where we are going to see some miraculous change on the earth or even within ourselves. We need to understand that this is a beginning of a very unique and specific cycle. The other thing is that in the smaller sort of cycle of things, it's actually a 20-year cycle. So every 20 years we have a Jupiter and Saturn conjunction relative to their orbit, their movement, in terms of how they're moving around the solar system. They catch up to align together every 20 years. But the conjunction that occurs every 20 years is in a particular triplicity, as in a particular sign, a particular quality, as in air, earth, fire, or water. The conjunction in Aquarius is very unique because we haven't had Jupiter and Saturn conjunct in the air signs for a very, very, very long time, something like 800 years. There was a quick entry point in the 80s where Jupiter and Saturn aligned in the sign of Libra, but that was a very brief moment because Jupiter went retrograde and then that was the end of that. So it wasn't as potent as the current conjunction that's about to occur. The other thing about this cycle is that it occurs every 20 years, but what we are going to see over the next 200 years is that Jupiter and Saturn will conjunct in the triplicity of air. So for the next 200 years, we're going to have those two celestial bodies, the two greats as they are known, coming together through the air signs, which is Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius, of course, and it begins in Aquarius, okay, on the 21st of December, which, as we know, is a solstice time as well. So that adds another level of intensity and meaning to this great conjunction. The last time there was a conjunction in Aquarius with these two bodies, well, there were two periods actually. One was in 1226, which was at 24 degrees of Aquarius. The other one was at 1405, and that was at 2 degrees of Aquarius. The reason that's significant is because A, that was clearly a very long time ago, and B, the potency of this conjunction that's about to occur now is that it's at 0 degrees of Aquarius. 0 degrees in astrology is a very potent degree. Literally, it's very potent energy because it's literally the beginning. Every sign starts at 0, right? 0 and the 29th degree in astrology from an evolutionary level is quite critical because from an evolutionary perspective, it's showing us the absolute true beginning of something, 0, or the absolute end of something, completion, 29th degree. So if you have planets in your own chart at 0 degrees or at 29 degrees, there's something very critical about that relative to your own evolution. You're beginning something totally brand new, as it were, if you've got a planet at 0 degrees. And there are some degrees at 0, as in cardinal degrees, for instance. They are known to be very, very, very critical degrees. Now, Aquarius is not cardinal, it's actually a fixed degree, but nevertheless, it's 0 degrees, so it's very, very potent, and it hasn't happened. I don't actually know when the last time was that Jupiter and Saturn were at 0 Aquarius. I would need to go back, God knows how long, but I've gone as far back as 1226, which was a very long time ago, right? You know, like 800 years ago almost, right? So we have this conjunction occurring at 0 degrees, which is clearly the beginning of a new paradigm, a new earth, a new reality. And we've, 2020, without a doubt, without question, has been the catalyst and the advocate for this new way of life that we are moving towards, which still has a lot of uncertainty around it. And the uncertainty is there because we have the nodes, the transiting moons nodes, squaring Neptune, which has been in play for a little while and will still be active till early next year. We have a conjunction, which basically a conjunction represents an unconscious force or energy. And that's the reason why conjunction aspects are the most potent, in my opinion, is because it's a totally unconscious energy. And you've probably heard me say throughout my videos before that the unconscious component in a human being is a lot more powerful than our conscious awareness. And that brings in the matter, of course, of free will versus fate and so forth, and that's a whole other conversation. But regardless of that, an unconscious component of ourselves coming through has tremendous power because it is activated through a conjunction aspect, for instance, or a solar eclipse, for instance, and I'm going to talk about the solar eclipse shortly. So what we're dealing with is an incredibly powerful conjunction with two bodies that have so much to do with the apparent reality we see before us, because Saturn corresponds to the nature and structure of reality as it appears and as it appears in our own conscious mind. And Jupiter is highly connected to the social norms and laws as well. Culture, religion, philosophy, faith, meaning, the search for meaning, actually. So Jupiter corresponds to creating the laws, if you like, the laws of truth. I say truth because Jupiter corresponds to truth, and yes, there are many truths. There's no one truth that is absolutely the only truth. As Krishnamurti said, and I've quoted this many times, truth is a pathless land, because we can't say that my truth is correct and your truth is wrong. We just can't do that. So, but the ultimate truth really comes from Neptune, actually, which is the energy that corresponds to divine source creation to all things. So when we experience the Jupiter energy here on the earth plane, it has very much to do with the laws, the cultures, the religions, a lot of the social structures as well. Jupiter rules law. The 9th house corresponds to law, courthouses and things like that, for instance. So these two bodies aligning in the sign of Aquarius, which is a sign that corresponds to the future. It corresponds to waking up, to individuation. Individuation in evolutionary astrology simply means to live or to lead an authentic path, to tap into your most authentic self and allow that to shine and be expressed and follow that. give birth to that, nurture that, develop that, because we are all conditioned from birth. We are all conditioned, and we are conditioned pre-birth as well, relative to, past life material, past life experiences, traumas, and so forth. So when we tap into Uranus and Aquarius, we are tapping into an aspect of ourselves where we are attempting to become more authentic in our life path, our life choices. So here we have the two greats conjunct in the sign of Aquarius, which corresponds to the future, futuristic ideals and ideas. So, technology has been the primary catalyst for the fast-paced nature of reality, how reality has expanded and developed from the technological level. That's all Uranus and Aquarius, simply put. But this cycle, again, is the birthing of something that's beginning, which we will see unfold over a 20-year period. And the biggest cycle, as I said, corresponds to a 200-year cycle, which we won't be here in this body. We'll potentially be back in another body with a different identity and so forth. But for the next 20 years, most of us, let's say, are likely to be here. So there is a collective birthing of a new paradigm being born with this Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in Aquarius, which is speaking to collective trends, collective new paths, new ways of living. Because again, we've come to a point in the world from a collective level where we've hit a wall. We've hit a critical point, and the change that needs to be seen equates to the Aquarian archetype, which has got very much to do with humanity, humanitarian causes, understanding, connection, realizing that we are one big family. That's Aquarius. Working together for fairness and equality and justice. And Aquarius and Uranus correspond to revolutions, and there are revolutions going on all over the place, particularly in the States, in the USA. So the other thing that I'd like to point to, and perhaps I'll bring up the chart, just before I bring up the chart, there's just one other thing. Well, there's several things, but one other thing I'll say before I bring up the chart, because you can't see this in the chart. In terms of the nodes that we are aware of, that we work with in our charts, or the transiting nodes, which are the moon's nodes, well, every single planet has nodes, just as the moon has. And all the asteroids have nodes as well, for those of you that are not aware. So currently, at the moment, the transiting north node of Venus, wherever Venus is in the sky, which is in Scorpio at the moment, in the tropical zodiac, the transiting node to Venus is at 1 degree of Aquarius. So when this conjunction occurs on the 21st of December, this conjunction, first of all, it aligns with Pallas Athene, the goddess Pallas Athene, and I will unpack that in a minute. But it also aligns with the transiting north node of Venus. And that's a very positive omen, I feel. There's nothing that I've read or come across that's been said about it. I'm just aware that the transiting north node of Venus is at 1 degree of Aquarius, so it is conjunct the Saturn-Jupiter conjunction, which is at 0 Aquarius. I feel that that's a very positive omen. Intuitively and instinctively, I feel that, because, well, there are some obvious things. Venus is a benefic planet. We have benefics and malefics in terms of traditional astrology, Hellenistic astrology. So the malefics are always Mars and Saturn, and the benefics are Venus and Jupiter. Venus is a benefic. She is the principle and goddess of love. And here we have her north node in a futuristic sign, Aquarius, which corresponds to greater fairness, equality, and justice as we move forward in our evolution. And she is a body of love, connection, divine feminine energy, balance, harmony. So we couldn't have had a more beautiful node, on this conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn. It's Venus's node. That's a pretty special omen, I feel. And that speaks to matters that we can't even see at the moment, and we won't see on the 21st. As I said, a conjunction it's an unconscious force being born, right? And hence its power, because it's unconscious and we don't know exactly what's going to be born out of that. The way we try to understand it is through the symbolism of the planets and the signs, okay, which is archetypal astrology. We need to understand the archetypes, the meaning of the planets, their mythology, their stories. The same goes with the zodiac signs. So a north node, which corresponds to our future evolution and direction relative to the collective, is speaking to the future connecting more with Venusian ways of life, which is about peace, harmony, and balance. And I would go a step further and connect this with the Venus star point, which the transiting Venus star point, which is currently still in Scorpio, ends her cycle in Scorpio after about 100 years or so that it's been there, and transitions into the sign of Libra, because the Venus star point moves backwards in the zodiac. So in a couple of years' time, the transiting Scorpio Venus star point transitions into Libra. Then she does go back into Scorpio for a couple more years, and then finally she enters Libra again, and then proceeds on her journey in Libra, which is for about the next 100 years. Now that can't be a coincidence that we have the transiting Venus star transitioning from Scorpio into Libra, which is a Venus-ruled sign. We have the transiting north node of Venus conjunct the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, which speaks to first a 20-year cycle, and in larger terms it speaks to a 200-year cycle relative to Jupiter and Saturn forming their conjunctions in the air triplicity Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius. So these are the points that I've connected in my own consciousness through the observations that I have made that speak to massive things relative to our future moving forward, which in fact have a really optimistic and positive light, a positive energy, because we are talking about air signs, which has got to do with being able to breathe and speak, communicate, share our ideas, find balance, find unison, unity, connection. Aquarius, Libra have more harmony and balance relative to our connection here on earth and to each other, the way we communicate with each other, the way we share, the way we grow through those experiences, allowing the diversity in without having the harsh judgments and so forth, right? Inviting in more balance. We're not even, I mean, it's coming in, these are the frequencies that are coming in. So we will be living through them and experiencing them. So I find that really, really inspiring and encouraging. Having the Venus star point, the transiting Venus star point in Scorpio, shifting into Libra, and then by 2030, we have the transiting Aries Venus star point moving from Aries to Pisces. And so, in other words, for the last 100 years, or it will be 100 years or more by the time we get to 2030, we've had the transiting Venus star point in Mars-ruled signs. Aries and Scorpio are ruled by Mars in traditional astrology. And if we use the rulership of Pluto to in terms of ruling Scorpio, then we can bring in Pluto as well, of course. The point being that we've had 100 years relative to the Venus star points, 2 of them, that are ruled by Mars, which we can see that, there's been so much violence and anger and hatred and conflict and tension and war and fighting, all this stuff has been going on for a long time. So when we observe the beautiful Venus star point transitioning into a Venus ruled sign, and which is Libra, and the exalted position of Venus, which is Pisces. Venus is exalted in the sign of Pisces, and Pisces is ruled by Neptune and Jupiter. So we have softer planetary frequencies that we are stepping into that do not correspond to war and anger and fighting and conflict and tension. They correspond to unity, love, beauty, divinity, balance, harmony, sharing, connecting. So if this doesn't make you feel inspired, I don't know what will. It's pretty significant. And these are the larger sort of cycles. So when I look at this Jupiter-Saturn conjunction happening on the 21st, I look at it through this lens as well. Again, just to summarize, it's a 20-year cycle. The largest cycle is 200 years. It's an air sign. It's Aquarius, which has to do with the human collective family. It has to do with equality, fairness, justice, revolutions, revelations, waking up, individuation, becoming more authentic, becoming more united. These are wonderful, wonderful things to imagine, to know that that's what we're stepping into, right? Now, let me just bring up the chart, because I'd like to just show you guys something, a couple of things. Just pop that up there. Okay, so here is the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in Australia. It occurs on the 22nd of December at 3:22 a.m. in Melbourne, Australian Eastern Standard Time. And there is Jupiter and there is Saturn. Perhaps I'll get my little assistance. So there it is there. And what I would like you to pay attention to is, look who's right next to Jupiter and Saturn. It's Pallas Athene. So Pallas Athene is at 4 degrees of Aquarius, okay? Jupiter and Saturn are at 0 degrees of Aquarius, 28 minutes. So Pallas Athene got there first, got into Aquarius first, in other words. So she's been in there for a little while, not very long, but she's ahead of them, right? Now, the very interesting thing from a mythological perspective, and in order to really understand the archetypes of astrology, it is so powerful to understand the myth, the mythology to every character. And so what we have here is we have this, it's a lineage, it's a family, because Jupiter is the father of Pallas Athene. She was born from his head. And so Jupiter corresponds to wisdom, right? And Pallas Athene is the goddess of wisdom because she was born from a father who represents wisdom and from his head. So it's a bizarre thing to contemplate from the left brain, because it's not a left brain thing. You've got to go to the right brain, which is Sag, which is Jupiter. So Pallas Athene often is referred to as the aspect in our psyche that corresponds to creative intelligence, but really she's the goddess of clear seeing and wisdom. She's the goddess of clear seeing because she is the goddess that has the ability to remove, she removes all projections, and thus that enables us to have clear seeing. That's why she's such a powerful goddess. Now here she is. I mean, think about that, the removal of all projections. The way we view our life and life is largely based on our own projections, whether we are aware of that or not, because most of it is unconscious. So imagine being so in tune to the vibration of Pallas Athene and being able to remove projections, at least the unhealthy ones. So here she is, the daughter of Zeus, Jupiter. Now, Saturn is Kronos, is the father of Jupiter. So he's the grandfather of Pallas Athene. So you can see that's why I said there's a little family conjunction here. There's a strong, powerful lineage of family, you know, from daughter to father to grandfather, right? So 3 generations, right? That's pretty damn significant. And Pallas Athene, you know, she's a very political goddess. She has a side to her that's very intuitive and creative, and has a strong healing component to her as well, depending on how you're working with her energy. And of course, where she is in your chart, both natally and or transiting. But in this case, in the sign of Aquarius and conjunct Saturn and Jupiter, the two bodies that have very much to do with the political structure and arena of our world, of our reality as we see it. And she is a goddess of justice and equality and fairness and all those things as well. A political goddess, a warrior goddess, but a warrior goddess who used her intellect, her intelligence, to come up with incredible strategies to make things better for the people on the earth. So her vibration is so tied into what we are seeing moving forward collectively relative to political structures or deconstruction, and the new way of life and new orders that are coming through. So she's leading this little gang here. She's the daughter, right, of Jupiter. I just think that that's just a mind-blowing little lineup there. A very powerful lineup. And she too, despite the fact that she's you know, a political warrior goddess, nevertheless, she's still a feminine archetype. So we have a feminine principle here, conjunct the Jupiter and Saturn, which is all about creating a better place here on Earth relative to fairness, equality, and justice, and fighting for causes that are, you know, for the underdog, for creating better systems, creating better ways of living, creating more fairness, because we know, when we look around, we know that there's an extreme imbalance of wealth that's distributed on the earth plane. It's still so imbalanced. You know, we know there are certain individuals or groups of people, you know, that have insurmountable amounts of what we call money that could be shared so that the 50,000 people over here or 500,000 people over here don't have to starve to death. You know, that those issues are still very prominent in our world everywhere, right? The imbalance is there. So this is why we're having a Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in the sign of Aquarius with Pallas Athene, so that the new laws and rules and norms that are given birth to during this time will foster and sustain and nurture a new paradigm moving forward, where there will be more balance, equality, and justice for all. And also revolutions, because Aquarius corresponds to revolutions. The new ideas and ideals that are going to be born out of this little triple conjunction here, and the transiting north node of Venus in Aquarius, clearly taking us into that future direction. is the ideals that they're so far away from our consciousness at the moment, to an extent, relative to how we think and how we perceive things at the moment. We don't even know what those things will be yet, because this is a conjunction, meaning the energy is unconscious. The unfoldment of this particular frequency will be seen essentially over the next 20 years. So we have to be patient. It's not going to change on the 21st of December. But the 21st of December is extremely important from the point of view of very similar to a new moon or a full moon, or particularly a new moon, let's say, where people have very specific rituals that they practice, right? Setting intentions, meditation, planting new seeds, creating new pathways, whatever it is that you do, during a new moon. Well, this is a similar thing, but this is a cycle that's not going to be for a month, because the new moon takes us through one lunation cycle, which is 1 month. This cycle is going to take us through the next 20 years. So there's the collective level, and then there's the individual level that we each will have relative to where this particular conjunction will occur in your own birth chart. So have a really clear, strong think about that. Reflect on this, because there's so much you can plant during these times with this particular conjunction. Some of the other things that I want to also point to about Jupiter and Saturn. These two bodies are, they are so different to each other, right? Jupiter is about expansion and Saturn is about contraction. So those two energies, they don't blend harmoniously, let's just say. They're just very, very different. Simple: contraction, expansion, limitation, opportunity. They couldn't be more opposite, really. And in mythology, when Saturn swallowed all of his children, the only one that got away was Zeus, Jupiter. So, Jupiter is such a powerful force in terms of what can uplift us, what can connect us, how we can connect to faith and intuition and trust and possibilities, unlimited possibilities. It's boundless. Saturn is the limitation that sometimes is necessary. And there's a reason why we have Saturn and Jupiter. We don't just have Jupiter, we don't just have Saturn. So that they're both just as important, but they represent and express different qualities. So when you see them conjunct together, the best way to work with this energy is to realize that you can really benefit from Jupiter's unlimited sort of possibilities, optimism, confidence, expansion, by working with Saturn as well and understanding where there may be some limitations. That's the key with working with that conjunction. It's working with the possibilities and the discipline, Saturn, patience, Saturn, reality, practicality. So, in other words, you may have this enormous dream, right? Something, a goal, something really huge that you're really excited about, that you really want to cultivate into your narrative, the narrative of your life story. If you didn't have Saturn's energy in this conjunction, if you ignore the Saturn component, then the chances are you will experience the Saturn as coming at you from external forces as a source of limitation, restriction, blockages. So the key with this conjunction is to work harmoniously with both Jupiter and Saturn, understanding that there are many possibilities, but in order for me to develop and cultivate those possibilities, I have to be realistic, I have to be practical, I have to be disciplined. You know, that very simple key words, but you apply them to yourself, to your life story and circumstances relative to this conjunction, which is very much about the future. Well, it literally is about the future, not only because it's a conjunction, but because it's in the sign of Aquarius. And Aquarius, as I said before, helps us to become more authentic in our life. I mean, personally, I don't underestimate the power of authenticity. The more authentic we feel, the more authentic we are, the more authentic we behave, the more aligned we are. And to feel misguided or misaligned is a journey that, yeah, sometimes that's part of your journey. That's what you have to go through. But I think the ultimate goal for all of us, to some in different ways, of course, for all of us, is to feel a sense of alignment within. What's that alignment about? It's about the soul and the personality being aligned, so that there isn't this division or discord or conflict, right? We ultimately we need to align with the soul's desires and evolution and direction of where it wishes to go. So this Saturn-Jupiter conjunction is very, very powerful even in that way, because it's going to be somewhere in your birth chart, right? So whatever house it's in, that's the area of life where you are looking at creating, cultivating, building something in your life that will unfold over the next 20 years. At a collective level, as I said, it is very much about these social norms and structures and rules and culture and religion and philosophy and truth and all those things, right? So those are the main things that I wanted to address relative to the Saturn-Jupiter conjunction. Pallas Athene being a primary key component in this story, leading the pack. The Venus transiting North Node conjunct this conjunction, the transiting Venus star moving from Scorpio into Libra and then down the track moving into Pisces, much softer, feminine, Venusian vibration that we are stepping into, which doesn't correspond to conflict and war and so forth, right? So these are very, very positive and inspiring things to know relative to where our future is moving, even though everything still seems very uncertain in a lot of ways. And let's not forget that Aquarius, which in traditional astrology is ruled by Saturn, however, in evolutionary astrology particularly, it is ruled by Uranus. And Aquarius, and Uranus more specifically, corresponds to diving into the uncertainty, taking a risk. That's what individuation is about. You know, you becoming more authentic doesn't mean that you know exactly what's going to happen tomorrow and how it's going to happen or what's going to happen in 10 years' time necessarily, but that would be Saturn. You know, if you're trying to control every corner of your life, that's a Saturn journey, because that gives people a sense of stability and security and certainty. Uranus is what takes us into the uncertain territory, but it's also what ultimately liberates us and brings freedom into our life and into our consciousness. But it takes takes courage to step into the uncertainty, right? So Aquarius likewise corresponds to elements of life that are very uncertain. There's unpredictability there, uncertainty. We don't know what's exactly going to come, but we can get a sense of it from the point of view of what these archetypes represent, and also the Pallas Athene asteroid goddess there, and the transiting north node of Venus, as I said. I'd just like to read what Asteroid Goddess says by Demetra George. So here's what she says about Pallas Athene in Aquarius. Pallas Athene in Aquarius represents a futuristic perception one can see in terms of all the various possibilities of the future. As a healer, she works with vibration, healing with color, sound, crystals, and white light as reflector of the sun's Leo rays, in brackets. Aesthetically, she expresses through creating the new as inventor or genius. She creates science fiction, art, computer graphics, new wave music, rock video, and radical art. These artists are out on the forefront of the future, translating the tone of what is coming in the masses. Politically, Pallas Athene in Aquarius is a political revolutionary, advocating and defending humanitarian causes and organizing grassroots protests. The wisdom of Pallas Athene in Aquarius is the wisdom of the future, creating forms that will benefit generations to come. See, we're also interested in ourselves and what's happening in our own life and things like that. Some of us are a lot more interested in, worldly, collective sort of matters, issues, and so forth as well. But when we're looking at our own chart, we're always trying to understand, well, what does this mean? What does that mean? What's that going to be for me? What's this going to be for me? And so on and so forth. And that's fine. I get that. But I think it's important to have some awareness there of it's not just about our own self. It's about everyone. It's about the whole earth, the whole human family. And so, Jupiter and Saturn and Pallas Athene in Aquarius are speaking to this future that we are heading into, which is about the betterment of humanity overall. Now, there are a lot of cultures, such as indigenous peoples, that understand the importance of a conjunction like this, and the fact that this conjunction is happening on the solstice. And so here in Australia, for instance, in a place called Uluru, there are numerous indigenous folk coming together with very specific ceremonies prepared and planned for that day. It is said that that part of Australia corresponds to the which chakra is it? I've just forgotten. The solar plexus chakra of the earth. So there's a lot of healing that's going to be taking place with very magical, spectacular ceremonies with indigenous people. I know that for certain. I've been coming across certain people's sharing about that, what's intended, what's planned, how people can get there if they wanted to go there and so forth. And that's going to be taking place in different forms and practices and traditions around the world through various indigenous communities and so forth. And we can, wherever we are, we can tune into this love that's being poured out, this clearing that's been intended, for all of us and for the earth herself, so that we can move to the next level of evolution, which we need to. And so, there's still a lot of holding on to what's been, what we've had, the way things have been. And that's just human nature, not wanting to step into uncertainty and old habits die hard. We're all creatures of habit, but evolution is inevitable, and it's happening all the time. And there are certain periods in time where it just comes rushing through like a tornado, which is what it's been doing in 2020. So it's just an incredibly critical point in evolution that we are all facing collectively and personally as well. The solar eclipse, let's just talk about that, and then I'm going to head off. Is there anything else I wanted to say about this? Let me just... okay. Just reflecting on this chart... see, look at this. I mean, Neptune, squaring the nodes so closely here. So this Neptune squaring the nodes is very important in this little mix down here as well. And Neptune has got to do with the ultimate source of truth, divine love, source creation to all things. And as I've said over and over again, when Neptune is projected through the personality, it is almost certainly always resulting in confusion and or disappointment. Now in this case, corresponding to the transiting nodes which are in Gemini and Sag, it obviously has to do with left brain, Gemini, right brain, Sag, truth, Sag, wisdom, Sag, information, data. And so therefore Neptune is creating this mass confusion relative to what's real and what's actually true. And I think that's been a collective shared experience by all of us. There's been so much data and information that's been utterly confusing. There's been what appears to be deception. There's been so much of that, and it's a really confusing energy. That will clear up, of course, because this Neptune's going to progress forward. But it is also our own responsibility, to observe and to be mindful of what it is we are absorbing, taking in, and spitting out of our gob, our mouth as well. So, we all have a responsibility in this shared collective experience, Okay, so I just want to bring up the solar eclipse chart. And there it is there. Okay. So the solar eclipse, which happens just in a couple of days' time, it's the 15th of December in Australia. And it'll be the 14th of December for everyone in the Northern Hemisphere. Eclipses belong to a particular family called Saros cycles or Saros series. This particular eclipse family belongs to an eclipse that was born in the 12th century. So this solar eclipse that we see here belongs to a cycle that began in the 12th century, okay? Nothing exists in isolation. The solar eclipse here, which is at 23 degrees of Sag, you can see here, there's the sun, there's the moon, 23 of Sagittarius, 8 minutes. The interesting thing about this eclipse is that you wouldn't think this just by looking at a new moon, which is what it is. It's a new moon with the nodes, which is what creates an eclipse, right? A solar eclipse or a lunar eclipse is always, it takes place because of the position of the moon's nodes. That's what an eclipse is. So that's why you see the south node very close here to Mercury, of course, as well, and the new moon, which is this is a total solar eclipse, so it's incredibly potent. Now, this solar eclipse happens to be at the midpoint of Pluto and Venus. That's a very, very important point, because that draws in what otherwise wouldn't be there, which is elements of relationships. The way Bernadette Brady describes this eclipse, here's the book that I use, Bernadette Brady, Eagle and the Lark. This is it is a technical book, but if you're serious about astrology, it's worth having. And there's a whole section where she addresses the solar eclipses, and just it shows you when they are and when they started, at the North Pole, South Pole, what year that was, etc., etc. And so this is this belongs to what's called 4 South. And as I said, it's at the midpoint of Venus-Pluto, which brings in relationships and something that's quite intense and could feel quite fated as well. Pluto corresponds to fate, and Venus corresponds to relationships. So there's something carried in this vibration of this eclipse that can bring some pretty intense encounters in relationships that could feel like those matters are out of your control. And she advises that instead of making hasty decisions and judgments and choices, if you find yourself in a predicament of that nature, to not act impulsively, but rather to wait for this energy to diffuse relative to your personal circumstances, and then make the decision later when things have completely calmed down. Now, that's pretty good advice. And so with eclipses, of course, the energy of this solar eclipse, whilst it's happening on the 14th, 15th of December, this energy kicked in from a couple of months ago. So it's not that something's necessarily going to happen on this day, although it may, for some people it may. But it's important to understand that eclipses carry a window, an orb of a couple of months pre and post the eclipse date. So it's important, therefore, to understand that even beyond this date, a couple of months down the track, this energy is still activated. And so therefore the suggestions about not being hasty about something that's come up, you'll know if it comes up for you, because it'll have a pretty strong you'll have a strong reaction to it, and it will have to do with some type of relationship that is going on in your life, right? It also could do with finances as well, because Venus corresponds to finances too. So if there's some financial situation that is proving to be difficult or challenging or whatever it may be, even with that, don't make any hasty decisions, would be the recommendation. Of course, what you do is up to you. I only give recommendations. So here's what she says. She says this series carries with it a very strong emotional feeling concerning relationships and or money. There could be anger or lust. There is a sense of fatedness, and individuals may find themselves caught up in relationship events which are beyond their control. These emotions may be blocked or checked in some way, leading to a great deal of frustration. The best approach to this eclipse is to avoid rash action until the issues settle down, which is what I was just explaining a moment ago. So that's all she says about that eclipse, but that's enough to kind of help us understand the energy of this, based on the fact that this solar eclipse is at the midpoint of Venus-Pluto. When you have a planet or planets, at a midpoint of two planets, it's that the planet at the midpoint is drawing from the two planets outside of it, right? That there's this shared engagement going on, that they're all tied in together. So the Pluto and Venus is feeding into this solar eclipse, in other words, right? So obviously check out where this solar eclipse is in your birth chart, because that's the area of life where these matters and issues will come to light, if indeed they do. the component of it being in Sagittarius is always going to take us into the arena of Jupiter, ninth house, Sag, which is about truth, perhaps wanting to understand a particular truth. But more than anything else, it's actually got to do with the search for meaning. See, the full moon that was in Gemini, the lunar eclipse that we had just a couple of weeks ago, that's, connected to this, of course. So Gemini is the information that you may have acquired. And the flip side to that coin, which is Sag, is, well, Sag is going to give you the meaning to that information that you found. Sag is always, it's the search for meaning and truth. And it has the ability to find it. It seeks it. That's where it vibrates from. So, but we can't have one without the other. That's why everything is a polarity. That nothing is separate. Nothing exists in isolation or operates in isolation. So this solar eclipse is speaking to matters of perhaps discovering more truth and wisdom, or certainly desires around seeking it, and or certain truths being revealed to you, because it is a solar eclipse, which means it's an unconscious energy, which means things come out of the hidden layers of our psyche that are now revealed or seen, that we can't access that necessarily just on our own accord, because we say, okay, I'm going to go and access that part of my unconscious today, and I'm going to look for XYZ and I'm going to bring it up. It doesn't really work like that. So solar eclipses work in that way. They literally bring out and up into our conscious field of awareness what has been hidden and that we are now ready to see. Whether that is something positive or negative depends on how we respond to what is revealed or seen, right? And of course, Neptune is squaring the nodes in this picture again, so that's part of the story here relative to, information, truth, Neptune in the middle of that, and trying to figure out what the hell is actually truth or not. And that's obviously on a collective level, and that could very easily speak to something in our own life that we may have some confusion about as well, right? So it is important to not be hasty, to not make decisions based on reactive situations. It's best to just kind of reflect and take a step back. Okay. And also this solar eclipse may be conjunct or opposite some planets in your birth chart, and if it is, then it's going to bring in those planets, the story, the inherent archetypal signatures of those planets. They will just add layers to the meaning of the eclipse wherever it is in your chart, right? So you need to think about where that is for you and whether it is aspecting any planets in your chart. It is a tricky energy though, and at the same time, I think at a more elevated, for lack of a better word, spiritual level, this solar eclipse is leading us into 2021. It is also the gateway that's opening things up for the Saturn-Jupiter conjunction, which occurs just days later. All these things are connected, right? It's literally a gateway that's opening up for us. And it's opening things up that are very unconscious, whether in the earth, the ether of the earth, the psyche of the earth, the soul of the earth, the soul of the collective, and then the soul within each individual. There are unconscious levels and components, material that will come up and rise, that will enable us to see certain truths that we have perhaps been needing and wanting to see for quite some time. So it is opening a really important gateway relative to the future moving forward. And then there's the whole galactic center and how it corresponds to that. So, there are so many layers that one can add to whatever they are looking at, but I like to just try and keep it, you know, to a certain level, because then it just becomes a Gemini thing, and all you've got is, you know, all this information, but what the hell does it mean? That's where Sag gives you meaning. So I'm going to leave it there because it's really hot here today and I'm going to hit the beach. So those are my offerings for the solar eclipse and the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. Naturally, if I was looking at your chart, I would be employing a number of different techniques and levels and things I'd be looking at, which I cannot address in a general sort of video in this format on my YouTube channel. So if you want to know more about this Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, what it might mean for you relative to the future moving forward, you can always contact me, have a reading with me, etc., etc. I think that's all I have to share for today. Was there anything else? Yes. Okay, so November was a great month relative to the launching of my classes. I did 2 classes on Venus and the Venus star point, an introduction, which was an in-depth introduction. That class went for 3 hours. It's more like a workshop as opposed to a class. I have the audio available if anyone is interested in buying that audio if you didn't make it to the class. Also, the next class will commence in January 2021, so next year, which is just a couple of weeks away. I haven't decided on the content just yet, but I will, and I will keep you guys informed. And I have everyone's email who did email me in November, so I will be emailing all of you relative to the next class and the subject matter and so forth. So, okay, I hope you guys are safe wherever you are, keeping well. I wish you all a Merry Christmas. For those of you that celebrate Christmas, happy solar eclipse. And just be assured, if you can, just with use your own heart and soul and intuition to tune into the information that I've shared today, whichever part of that resonates with you, and understand the importance of it, particularly from a more optimistic level, because we are moving into a more optimistic future, but it's not going to happen tomorrow, and it may not even feel like it's happening in 2021, if I'm going to be honest. So just be aware of that. Be aware that there's a timing. There's a timing in everything in life, on a collective level and on an individual level. And astrology is the most, in my opinion, the most powerful tool that assists us in understanding the timing of everything that occurs and unfolds, both personally and collectively as well. And that is so, especially when you have a correct birth time, which a lot of people don't. So there's another point. If you want your chart rectified, you can contact me. That's another thing that I do. Okay, I'm out of here. Much love, much blessings. Thank you for listening and connecting with me, and I'll see you guys very soon. Much love. Bye.